Hello, welcome to Competitive Paupercast episode 5. With me is Will
Hey guys.
and David.
Hello.
Alright, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Stompy here. But before we do that, we're going to do a little shout out here to the Battle for Charity, which is brought to you by Jason Sirichoke. And what this is a charity battle for a charity called Child's Play. And what we're doing here is we're taking donations and taking pledges for when we play in daily events. We're going to donate booster packs and sell them at the end of this season. And eventually, we're going to donate all of our proceeds to charity. And the special shout out I want to do right here is for contributor, shout out to Jay Siri for organizing this whole thing, and then also to Just Sin for a $150 donation, straight up. No packs, no winning events for him. He just straight up said, "I'm giving you guys $150." So big shout out to Just Sin there.
Yeah, that is crazy. That guy continues to be very impressive. Last
Definitely.
week.
Yeah, and his reasoning, I shouted out to him on Twitter too, and his reasoning was that, instead of, I don't have time to play in daily events to make this donation, but here's a portion of what I've made just writing for MTGO Academy, or he's the MTGO Academy one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's a portion of what he's made writing for various websites, including MTGO Academy, and it's a huge donation, so special thanks to Just Sin there. So why don't we go ahead and get to the meat of it. What have you guys been playing?
Well, the episode 5 is about Stompy, and I've been playing Stompy.
Playing the events, or?
I haven't really had a chance to play in any daily events. I got to play in a player run event the other night, made it to top 8, lost in semifinals, but the deck's been performing just top notch for me. I mean, we're going to do a little breakdown in a little bit. In the show notes, I posted my current deck list, but I don't know. I really like how it's been playing out lately.
Alright, cool. David?
Well, I've just been drafting more M14 and stuff. On Sunday, I got to play, maybe Saturday, one of those nights. I got to play back-to-back dailies because they had one, and then immediately after another one happened. So I played AzoriusKitty, 3-1 to one, and then 2-2 the other. I realized that if I'm going to beat elves, I need negates in the sideboard, because just waiting around for them to distant melody is a bad strategy. And I still can't beat Fissure. But if Fissure goes away, then if Fissure goes away, like a lot of stuff happens, the reason to play elves goes away. And then Fissure goes away. So then I have a really good shot, I think. I think that deck's actually goes from wherever tier you want to call it now to tier 1 if the expected bans of Cloudpost and Fissure go away. And I played against 2 clan people in there. I played E-Hustle and his Tortured Resistance deck, and I played against Greystone and his Auras deck. That was fun. And then I've been playing some Modern, too. I have a tweaked Storm list that I'm working on.
Oh, excellent.
That's pretty cool.
Is this your first Modern deck that you picked up?
Not my first, but kind of. Yeah, it's the first one I'm tweaking. The first real one I made was just a straight brew, all the way around. And it was okay. It was a smallpox deck. It was okay.
Yeah.
It had about a 50% win rate, but I wasn't satisfied with it, so I decided to go a different route.
Yeah, when I came back to Magic and run Dark Ascension, I toyed around with Smallpox. It was real fun. But ultimately, I decided, I'm just going to beat people down with red deck wins. And then obviously the meta became such that red deck wins was no longer good, and I was like, screw this, I'm going to Pauper. So, that was me. But for me, this past week, I've played, I continue on my plan to learn how to play Fissure. I played Blue-White Fissure in 2 dailies and failed twice, and I figured out the reason that I failed with Blue-White Fissure, because in all my theory crafting, I was like, well, White has like better sideboard options, and it's half a turn faster than the mono blue Fissure decks. What I realized is it's actually not half a turn faster; it's half a turn slower because you have to wait for your blue mana. And this came into play when I came up against goblins. I was 1-1 going into round 3 both times, and both times I ended up facing down goblins. And what happened both times is in game 3, I didn't have access to blue mana until turn 3 because I had to play my Azorius Chancery. And if I can't do anything before turn 3, then goblins just overruns me. So.
Yeah, I actually noticed that in testing that the white-blue version was easier for goblins than mono blue. But I don't think it's because of the mana necessarily. I think it had to do with kind of what you were saying, where like you just don't do anything until that turn.
Yeah, it's like you're not casting Prophetic Prism on turn 2, right? You're typically playing your Azorius Chancery on turn 2 to try to get access to that white mana or play the familiar, but what that also means is that you can't Hydroblast a critical Mog War Marshal or a Goblin Bushwhacker. Right, so they just overrun you, and then they get you down to 5 or 6 life, and at that point you have to infinite combo Fissure off, and it's just not always feasible to do that, and they can still just Mountain Lightning Bolt you again, and you're dead. So, yeah, not having access to Hydroblast on before turn 3 is just brutal for you if you're playing against goblins. So that's what I've been doing.
That's cool.
So I guess we'll move on to our main topic now.
Yeah.
Now I know, David, you haven't had a lot of experience with Stompy, but
No, I'm willing to accept that I'm an idiot when it comes to this deck.
well,
it seems so like cut and dry on paper, but like everything I'm told is that it's not. So I'm willing to accept I'm wrong.
It's one of the most complicated decks to play, and it's it can play like an aggro deck, it can play like a control deck, and it can play like a tempo deck. So there's a lot of different angles of play you can get when you're playing Stompy. We're just going with the default Stompy list here, and I'm not going to go over like card by card the individual list. I'm more interested in going over the general strengths and weaknesses of the deck, the core cards, like these are the cards that every Stompy deck is running, and then there's a couple of variable cards too that most decks are running, 50 to 80% of the meta, give or take. But so what's good about Stompy is that, for one, it's monocolored, and that's always pretty key in Pauper aggro decks, because that is what you're typically going to call Stompy. And it's got so many different angles of play for any type of situation. You can always apply pressure. You can always play cheap, evasive threats and back them up with pump spells. And if your opponent ever stumbles, he's just dead. And I'm sure you've seen that from the other end of the table there, David. If you played against Stompy and dailies plenty of times. And
yeah, and I know their general game plan against me, regardless of the deck.
Yep.
Beat face usually, because I'm usually doing some sort of non-interactive thing. To some extent.
Yeah, but if you stumble on mana for a turn, if you misplay anything, then Stompy will punish you like crazy for it.
Absolutely. If you have one extra, you flood for one turn, or you don't get that second or third land drop, it is quickly going to be all over for you. If you can't answer, a couple of like the turn 1, 2, and 3 threats that Stompy drops, it's pretty much getting locked up in the next turn or two.
Yeah, you got any good stories there, David, about you stumbling and losing to Stompy, or?
I think one of the things about them is that I don't really lose to them very often. The decks I tend to make, and I think Jay Siri told me this. He said Stompy's like the number one deck that will lose to random rogue brews, and I feel that that's true. I don't really lose to them all that often, but I did lose to one in terrible fashion in a daily a couple weeks ago, and he was stuck on one land the entire time. And he was able, and he had the Quirion Ranger for like the first couple turns, so maybe a turn or two, because I chose not to Death Spark it immediately to play a guy instead. And he got a Wild Mongrel out, and he was able to Rancor the Wild Mongrel, and I could do nothing about it, because I had a Sparksmith in play even, and put just one other Goblin. So every turn he just it's just one card if I ever tried to like do anything about it. And so I just slowly got beat down by this single Wild Mongrel as he just discarded other 2 casts and cast things from his hand. That was pretty brutal.
Yeah, that just goes to show you some of the variety of play. It's like this guy was stuck on one land and he played one creature and was able to back it up, and he could beat you just as easy as that. So, yeah, and another thing about Stompy is it's the perfect foil to the number one deck in the meta right now. Number one deck in the meta is and probably will continue to be Delver, and Stompy has a really good Delver matchup. The problem with Delvers, they can usually only take care of one threat at a time, and Stompy's creatures are just so high quality that you can cast them through counterspells, and if you manage to land one creature or one Rancor, Delver's just in a world of hurt against you.
Yep.
So there's that. I know as a Delver player, I've got about a 50-50 win rate against Stompy, but I'm a better than average Delver player, and I would say that most Delver players have a much lower average than that against good Stompy pilots. I know Jay Siri and a couple other guys just pretty much don't ever lose to Delver when they're playing Stompy, so...
Yeah, right now, looking at my little spreadsheet here, I have a 63%, 62.5 win percent against Delver over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I don't typically lose to Delver when I'm playing Stompy either, but every once in a while I do lose, but I typically only lose against really good Delver pilots.
Yeah, I mean, there's really, as a Stompy player, there's very little you can do against that, turn 2, flip Delver into, spray back up for the win, because as soon as those Delvers start getting in the air, unless you pull one of your scatter shots, it's the beginning of the end for you.
Yeah. But barring the Delver nut draw where they flip a Delver and then back it up with fairies and ninjas and whatnot,
yeah,
Stompy is typically going to be able to land more powerful evasive threats than Delver can take care of. Delver can deal with. Until Delver gets the Spire Golem online, and then you can just use pump spells to go through the Spire Golem. So, but that being said, we'd talk about how complicated Stompy is, but I think it's actually a really good starter deck if you're brand new to Pauper. Because it is very difficult to play it at like a really high level, but sometimes the deck is just powerful enough that you don't have to worry about playing it at that high of a level. Sometimes the deck is just going to carry itself through to victory because the synergies with everything in the deck are just so good that you can often just win because the deck is really, really good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was my starter deck when I got into Pauper back in February of this year, and I played it to some reasonable success in like the tournament practice room and whatever. And then it's a good confidence builder because after about 2 months or so, I jumped into a couple of daily events and eventually took a couple down. But then I don't know. Stompy was having some issues in the meta. It was having a tough post matchups and stuff like that. So kind of had to backed away for it. But now that I've gotten back into it, it's 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 good to be back.
Yeah. Stompy was my starter deck for Pauper too, and I think I think I've told the story before about the first time I played against Stompy. I played or played a daily event. I played against the Exhume deck. It's like the only Exhume deck that I've ever seen in a daily, and he crushed me there. And then I lost round 2 to some random, like a Goblins build who got a Sparksmith online really early, both games, and I was like, ugh. But I pushed on through, and I started getting some good success with Stompy, and that fueled me to building my Delver deck with the wins that I was having from Stompy. And then I moved over to Stompy, but I still do switch pretty frequently between Delver and Stompy. Those are the two decks that I really enjoy taking to dailies, because I feel like both of them have game against everything. And that's one of the things, too, is that Stompy has game against pretty much everything now that Simic Stormpost is out of the meta, pretty much. It had a really bad Simic Stormpost matchup, and that's actually what led me to be like, all right, I'm moving over to Delver now, because Simic Stormpost started taking over. Thanks, David.
Yeah, yeah. That was like a matchup. It's very rare I ever lost Stompy. In fact, that's like I think what's colored me so much against them is it's just like I think I went from January till late March, early April without dropping a match to them.
Wow.
Something like that. And then, actually, more recently, I have lost to them because I think they've figured out sort of what they need to do, which is basically keep a hand with like 1 or 2 creatures and all pump, and win the coin flip. Like both those things have to happen.
Yeah, you definitely have to have like the nut draw to beat Simic Stormpost.
Yeah, but even then, sometimes that just doesn't work, because
Oh yeah.
chain moments pieces, there's nothing you can do about it.
Nope.
And that brings us to basically the weaknesses of Stompy. And we talked about it a little bit there. They've got no real card advantage, right? Stompy's not drawing cards like Ninja of the Deep Hours or Divination or anything like that. And you're a 100% creature-based deck, right? Goblins at least can back up their creatures with Lightning Bolts or Fire Blasts. But you can't do that with Stompy. Your creatures have to get through to kill them. So Moments Peace is a huge issue for Stompy. Any deck running Moments Peace is going to have a very good matchup against Stompy.
Yep.
And you can't really interact with your opponent's creatures either whenever you're playing Stompy. You have to rely on the fact that your creatures are bigger and better than theirs to push through damage. You can't kill their creatures in any relevant way, with the exception of Scattershot Archers against Delver. So what that means basically, though, is that you're going to have bad matchups against decks like Hexproof or Delver Fiend, because you really can't deal with their creatures at all. Vines of Vastwood being the exception, but you can't Vines the Hexproof guys, and the Delver Fiend decks can often just go Apostle's Blessing, and you're like, well, I guess that plane's out of the water.
Yeah, exactly. It's Delver Fiend has been my weakest matchup since getting back into Stompy, just because you see it everywhere. So it is. I do have the most matches against it currently right now. It's a pretty. You have to be very aggressive, and you have to hope that they don't that they understand, or they don't understand what you're trying to what your game planning is against them. Most of the time, I've been finding that if I just go in and just turn everybody sideways every turn, I more often than not get there. But it's that Shadow's Rift or Artful Dodge kind of shadow unblockable combo that it just puts you out, because you only really have 4 cards that can do anything against it. Sure, I can sideboard into Moment's Peace and Fog to kind of buy me an extra turn or 2, but it's really most of the time they have Dispel backup or something like that to kind of help them get there.
Yeah, and that's one of those decks that's not really interactive for you. You just have to you're both decks are just going for the fastest goldfish necessary to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can bring in fogs and moments pieces. Often they'll bring in dispels though, and you're just like, well, if he had the dispel, he won, and he had the dispel, so he won.
Yeah.
So what's your win percentage there?
Against Delver Fiend,
Yeah.
right now I have only a 46% win percent.
And how about hexproof?
I haven't really played Hexproof. I only have one game against it, and I beat him.
What do you think about the hexproof matchup, Chris?
I think the hexproof matchup should be weaker than it is, but if you sideboard into fogs and moments pieces and stuff, it gets a lot better because they're much the same way that you are. Is that they can't really deal with fog effects, and if they're just trying to turn their deeds sideways, then sometimes your fog effects can get them on critical turns. You know, if they slam an Armadillo Cloak and like, all right, attack you for 10, and you fog, and you're like, all right, well, I attack you back for 17. Now you're dead.
Yeah, most of the time you win on the crackback after a fog or a moment's peace. I also have I can also sideboard in 3 gleeful sabotages, which are really nice and
Yeah,
kind of
those are very, very good.
deconstructing Voltron. But I don't know, from what I can remember back a couple months ago when I was playing, Hexproof was almost like a 50-50 matchup most of the time. If, once again, that's a deck that can really, stumble in the early turn. So if it stumbles early, it's a win. If they, start to flood around turns like 3 and 4, they don't really get the, one big 15/15 trample lifelink creature up there. Then again, that game's over before before they know it. Most of the time, it's really just stopping the Armadillo cloak, because if you can prevent them from gaining life, it's pretty easy to be able to manage 20 damage, since they have no interactivity with you.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel. Pretty much exactly what you said is how I feel about when I play with goblins. When I play them, it's like good race unless they have Armadillo Cloak. So I'm probably slight dog in that matchup because of that.
Yeah, and I actually think Goblins is a little bit weaker because they don't have the fog effects and they don't have the enchantment destruction against Hexproof, and maybe that's why Hexproof is starting to see a recent comeback. I still think that we talked about this last week, that Cyclops is just the better Voltron deck.
I think right now that's true, for sure.
Yeah, Delver Fiend's just the better Voltron deck right now, and they have ways to get through fog effects with Dispel, and so I
They
think
can go under Fissure, which I think is just the most important part. Like, Hexproof's still a dog to Fissure.
Yeah, Hexproof is... I think they're a turn 5 Goldfish, usually.
That's about right.
Yeah, somewhere around then.
And we've learned recently that turn 5 is just... That's when Fissure goes off, so Hexproof is... Yeah, Fissure can't bounce the dudes, the Hexproof guys, but if you bounce all the enchantments, it's pretty much just as good. Because it's going to take them a while to build back up the enchantments. To build back up their Voltron, and then Fissure can just Voltron again. Or Voltron... The Fissure deck can just Fissure them again,
And sometimes they
back
just
to
can't
square
win,
one.
because a lot of them play like super greedy mana bases. A lot of the Aurus decks.
Yeah, like
And,
16 lands, and...
Yeah, so like none of them are planes. So you'll just bounce all their lands, and then they actually just can't recast their ethereal armors and Armadillo Cloaks because you've knocked their land enchantments into the graveyard.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Hexproof is... I don't want to kind of get into Hexproof too much, but I know that a lot of lists have been starting to run Travel Prep, which has kind of helped them out in the Fissure matchup.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, it lets them bash through Mole Drifters.
Yeah. But once again, you need to have threats on the board to be able to fight them, and if you only really have one threat, it's kind of easy for them to play around that.
Yeah, and in my practicing of Fissure lists, I've learned when I'm playing against Hexproof that I just pile block now. Like if they have a dude and they play their forest, and I've been playing around travel preparations now because I've been seeing that. I've got a couple of fairies and mole drifters out, and like they attack with their dude. I'm just gonna throw every blocker I have against that dude.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's how I like to approach things as well. Is that if just send in all your blockers, just send the entire thing right at them and make them pick who they're going to take out, because most of the time they might get it wrong. They might leave behind that key threat or that key piece that you need. Whereas just doing that single chump blocker is it's not going to get there for you. Maybe you take out their big creature and you have, maybe a Nettle Sentinel or something in hand to kind of throw down on the on when it comes back to you. So if you have to sacrifice a whole team to just take out, a big 13-13, I'm usually pretty willing to do that.
Yeah, so the only creature I'm playing that I won't do that with is like Umog's Crusher from playing Mono Blue Fissure.
Oh yeah.
I want to keep him around because he's very, as soon as you play the Crusher against the Hexproof deck, they just lose. They can't. They have no meaningful way to interact with the Crusher.
Nope.
Other than hoping they have their Voltron assembled and leaving that guy back. So, but then often I'll just I'll attack with my Crusher and snap it back to my hand after the Annihilator trigger, and then replay him.
Yeah.
So that's another nifty trick you can do. But anyway, Hexproof is not what we're talking about. We're talking about Stompy.
Yeah, we got a little sidetrack there.
Yeah, but it's you probably should not pile block against Stompy because you're gonna get groundswell blown out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pile blocking against Stompy is not really a great idea unless you really, really need to get rid of that one threat that they have, and you don't mind losing 4 creatures to a groundswell. Because that's typically what's going to happen if Stompy looks like they're making a bad attack, like they're attacking their Rancor Nettle Sentinel into your Spire Golem and Delver and whatnot, then don't pile block there because you're going to get Vines of Vastwood or whatever. It's just going to blown out. I would say just throw your Spire Golem in front of it and make them use a pump spell to kill the golem and save their dude. So the final real weakness that I see when I'm playing as a Stompy pilot is sideboarding is really hard with Stompy. Because you don't want to dilute the deck too much to make it ineffective. But a lot of decks are bringing in things like Coral Net against you. So you're like, well, I have to hate the hate. But I can't hate the hate too much because then my deck doesn't work. So how do you approach sideboarding, Will?
Well, sideboarding is always that's always been a tricky thing because exactly what you said. You don't want to dilute the deck. It plays so well just as is that most of the time it's tough to, you're like, oh man, I'm going to bring in these 3 cards. It's going to be great. And then you look at your cards and go, well, all these cards are great. So most of the time what I kind of do is if it's a kind of controlling matchup, I try to just take out, like against Delver, anything that runs counter spells, I kind of take out the pump, except for really Delver Fiend. I take out the pump and I just add in more threats. That's one of the big things that I like to do. And then, usually after that, it's kind of like simple decisions of whether or not if I want to put in those fogs and moment pieces, if I want to, if I think life gain is going to be important, I have 3 Volt Scourge in the sideboard for me. If it's against Post, you got Thermokarst in the sideboard for me. And most of the time, it's like things like Gather Courage or, my Bone Splitters that are coming out.
Yeah. So, David, you want to talk about Thermokarst?
Yeah, I never care about it. I just if my opponents are thermokarsting me, it means that they're taking a turn off from doing anything. So normally, like, yes, I have to go find another cloud post when I'm playing Fissure, but one of two things that are usually going on. Either I have a Ghostly Flicker crop rotation, so the Thermokarst is like effectively countered. They're trading like 3 mana for a card in my hand, so they're like doing a half Mind Rot. Or I just like it's just so rare that like that tempo hit actually matters to me for 3 mana that it's so it just doesn't seem very good. It's when I Stompy opponents do it to me, I'm usually just like, sweet, at least you didn't play another threat.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the way I view it too. Is I don't play Thermokarst in my Stompy deck anymore. It looks like less than 50% of tournament players are playing Thermokarst in their decks, in their sideboards now. Stompy players.
I'm not like, I wouldn't hate on the lush growth type thing. Like, yeah, it can get flickered away and whatnot, but that is like, and I'm not sure what I think about Rays either. But at those levels of like 1 casting cost, you might be able to get the necessary tempo, continue to play guys, and do something. So I'm not going to say that I think that that when you get approached like 1 mana, it's bad, but 3 mana, unless you're doing something like blowing up the cloud post and doing 2 damage or something, doesn't seem like worth the tempo hit at all.
Yeah, that's the way I view it too. I'm just against Fissure. I'm just bringing in the Scattershot Archers. Well, I'm running Scattershot Archers main now, but I'm just bringing in those guys and not really changing the deck too much against Fissure Post because it's almost pre-boarded against Fissure Post, just with all the pump spells and Rancors and whatnot. So, yeah, I think as a Stompy player, you shouldn't be playing Thermokarst. I think you should just be continuing to beat phase. Don't change your game plan. Leave up Vines of Vastwood for the critical Fissure turn so you can Vines your biggest threat and leave it behind and hopefully kill them on the following turn. So there we go.
I had some questions.
Sure.
Hunger of the Pile Pack. Is this card good?
This card is excellent. So what Hunger the Howl Pack does is it enables like sort of the same way that like Hexproof wins, right? You're just gonna you're gonna have a huge creature that nobody can ever deal with. You know, if you make your Riverboa a 5/4, then who can deal with that? Nobody can. The answer is nobody can deal with that. You can chump it, but you know, let's say you make your Garrick's Companion now a 6/5 with trample. You can't deal with that. There's just no way to deal with a 6/5 trampler in Pauper, other than Doomblades and whatnot. And then if you have Vine's Protection, then you're good to go. There's no way that your opponent can win if you have a big hungered dude with pump backup.
Yeah, there's nothing better than like that feeling of putting on a a Riverboa. That's usually, you know, at worst it's a 4-turn clock if you haven't done anything as of that point. It's typically, you know, a 2 or 3-turn clock once you've how packed up a Riverboa. Most of the time I mean, this kind of goes back to just like, you know, getting the right idea of how you should be playing your games and setting up your main phase, your combat phase, and second main phase in a proper order, and that you're not really wanting to play a lot of stuff in your first main phase, unless like for some reason you need to untap a Nettle Sentinel or something to that extent. Most of the time, you're going to be playing creatures and spells after the combat phase because one, you want to always have that mana up as a threat of pump, and two, if creatures die or say you get blown out by an Electrickery right in the middle of combat phase, you always have that second main phase to kind of re-up on your threats, and then if you have it in your hand, Howl Pack to go to back that up. So that's something that, you know, when we kind of talk about the complexity of like the secret complexities of the deck, and that's something that players should be kind of, you know, looking out for, is that a lot of the times you don't want to be playing, you know, you get that sweet draw, and you want to, just put it on the board and like kind of assert your dominance. But you kind of should be, waiting until that second main phase to do any kind of actions.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd
what
say the,
what matchups do you like the Howl Pack in? Because like that's another one of those ones where when I'm playing Fissure or whatever, when I say when I'm playing Fissure, it usually like applies to most of the decks I play with, even though it's not Fissure. Like AzoriusKitty is generally the same way with Hunger of the Howl Pack. It's just like they never. Half the time my opponents play Hunger the Howl Pack against me, it's to put a single +1/+1 counter on something, and I just don't care because they're aware that nothing's going to die ever.
yeah,
Yeah,
the way Howl
go
Pack
ahead.
is really good in the combat-based matchups. So if you're in the Stompy Mirror Delver, I mean, it's not good in Delver, but it's okay in game one to just sort of get them with the
Yeah.
hunger. And like Affinity is another big one that it's really good against.
Yeah,
Okay,
excellent.
yeah.
It's excellent in Affinity. I mean,
And
even okay. So like, I just played a match last night where I have a Riverboa on board against Delver Fiend. He's got the island out, and he tries to go for um, the kill I fog. In response, I'm gonna crack back for the win. So he takes out my I have a Rancored up um, Pit Skulk. So I was gonna go in on that for the win, and I had a Riverbow out as well. I don't know why he decides to kind of go against that. Riverbow goes down. Pit Skulk goes down. I get the Rancor back, and I had Vines. I had Howpack in my hand. Played Howpack at the end step. Made it a 5/4, and just beat his face in with it. There was really nothing he can do about it because all I had to do at that point is just keep regenerate mana up, and the match was over. So those are some of the situations that I like to use Howpack in, or that I've seen that it's been good against. In like decks against Fissure, I always take out Howpack because most of the time a creature's getting bounced or something to those extent, and those counters just disappear.
yeah,
But
the oth-
in
the other deck
aggro,
that Howl Pack is really good against is Blue Red Fissure or Blue Red Post rather.
yeah,
Because their only way to remove your threats is to bolt them or flame slash them or whatever.
I suppose it gets them above the Flame Slash test.
Yeah, it gets it gets
yeah,
your 2/2s above the flame slash test. So then your opponent has to use 2 cards to kill that creature, and then if you have a Vines of Vastwood to back that up or another pump spell, then their 2 cards spent to deal with your 5/5 are just wasted, and you just kill them with a 5/5. So there you go. That's where Howl Pack is really good.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And then I had another one, I think. Um, Silhana Ledgewalker. Where is that
Yeah.
guy? Where did he go away?
He went away because he's a 1/1 for 2.
yeah,
That's all I can really say. He's just not that. He's much better in a more interactive meta, but right now Stompy doesn't have the time to play 1/1s for 2. Your threats need to be more powerful than that. They need to be able to bash through mole drifters and clouds of fairies and whatnot.
So it's a
And
Fissure Hedge.
it is a Fissure hedge.
Oh.
The cards like Garrick's Companion and your 2/2s or 2/1s for 2 are more aggressive, and that's where you need to be with Stompy right now in this meta because you're not really interacting with Fissure at all. You're just trying to kill them before they go off. So yeah, most Stompy lists have just completely gotten rid of the Silhana Ledgewalker. It doesn't do much in the way of in the face of mole drifters and fairies. It was much better when the meta was much more like geared towards goblins and affinity, And it's still really good against those two decks, Goblins and Affinity, but against all the other decks, you would much rather have a Riverboa or a Safehold Elite or a Wild Mongrel or a Garrick's Companion. So, yeah, let's bring that to basically the core cards of the deck, though every Stompy deck is running these cards in some numbers. Nettle Sentinel, Quirion Ranger, Skargan Pitskull, Young Wolf, Groundswell, Vines of Vastwood, Gather Courage, Rancor, and Hunger of the Howlpack. Like all Stompy lists are running these cards for 100% sure. I'm not talking about the sideboard here. This is main board discussion at the moment. Where Stompy has a little bit of a variation, though, between lists is the cards like Scattershot Archer, Riverboa, Garrick's Companion, Safehold Elite, Sohana Ledgewalker, Vault Scourge, Shinnin of Lifestorer, and Wild Mongrel. I wrote an article a while back about the core cards of Stompy are about 50-ish cards, and the last 10 are really up for debate. And talking with a couple people, what it really comes down to is like personal preference, and these last 10 cards are what's really are where you're really hedging against the meta. Things like Scattershot Archer is really good right now, and it's even a good main deck. And because most Stompy lists now are actually running main deck, Scattershot Archer's Vault Scourge is no longer an option to run main deck.
Yeah, I do see that happen, though.
Yeah.
Rising them out.
I'm guilty of it myself. The last time I ran Stompy, I ran 2 Vault Scourges in the main and 2 Vault Scourges on the side. And what I realized is that if I come up against the Stompy mirror, I'm not sure whether I should bring in Scattershot Archers or bring in Vault Scourges. Because if my opponent brings a Vault Scourges, then I want Scattershot Archers, but that's a non-bow with my own Vault Scourges, so I really don't know what to do here. So I've gotten rid of the Vault Scourges entirely from my Stompy list, and I missed Sunday night's daily because I was tweaking my Stompy list, and I was just late by like 10 seconds to enter the daily because I was taking Vault Scourges out of my Stompy list before I was about to enter it.
The classic mistake.
Yeah. And for a while here, I had a really good run when I was playing Stompy when I was playing Garrick's Companions, because nobody was prepared to deal with Garrick's Companions. A 3/2 Trampler for 2 is, it's definitely on par for the curve, and he's got that natural built-in trample ability. And one of your biggest threats as a Stompy player is Rancor, right? Everybody's worried about Rancor, and your opponents will often save up mana to snap or lightning bolt your creature whenever you try to Rancor it. Well, Garrick's Companion does not give a flying crap about Rancor at all. It's just going to trample through anyway.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and Garrick's Companion, that's you said it before, that's another good target for Howlpack, because one, he gets out of the flames slash range with getting up to 5 toughness, and 2, 6/5 trampler. Like, who's dealing with that? Nobody. Like, that is smashing people's faces in all day.
Yeah. So one of the other cards you can use to hedge against the meta is Safehold Elite. In removal heavy metas, Safehold Elite's really good. Like, if you're facing down Is It Post a lot, then making them deal with a creature 2 times is just a pain in the butt for them. I've ran Safehold Elite a lot to previous success, but I've recently eschewed Safehold in favor of the Garrick's Companions, and I'm okay with it. I think if Is It Post was to take over the meta again, Safehold Elite's a better option, but for right now, Garrick's Companion is much better in dealing with Fissure than Safehold Elite is.
Yeah.
So we already talked about the Sohana Ledgewalker and the Vault Scourge. The other optional card that has recently just sort of gone away from Stompy list almost altogether is Shinnin of Lifestorer.
Yeah, that was actually another question I had. Like, where's that guy good?
That guy's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You never know when he's really good, but when he's really good, he is like, I won the game good. So, man, he's not even in 50% of the list of any of the list anymore.
No, I saw him as a one-of in one of the last daily events.
Yeah, and I've been seeing like mostly he's been relegated to the sideboard, which is kind of odd. I mean, I'm not running it
But
either.
like, when do you bring him in? I guess would be the question.
Any creature matchup really is he's really good. Because what he does, I mean, he's a lure on a stick, obviously, and I think you really try and bring him in against the more grindy creature matchups like goblins and Delver. Like he's awesome against Delver, right? Because he makes it to where they can't play a Delver anymore. After he's on board, they can't play a Delver because the Delver has to block it, and you're gonna just eat the Delver with the Shinnin. And that's like the worst case scenario is you eat the Delver with a Shinnin of Lifestory. So he's really good there, and against like decks like Affinity or whatever, you can just they play their 4/4s or whatever, and you back up the Shannon with any kind of a pump spell at all, and you just eat a 4/4. Then you draw another pump spell, and you eat another 4/4. And soon enough, he's done so much work for you that he's won you the game. And dear God, if you Hunger the Howlpack him, that's just your opponent can't win anymore. If you get a Morbid Hunger on a Shinnin, your opponent no longer can possibly win.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I figured. I just assumed he was for creature matchups. And I'm down with him being in the sideboard. I think that makes a lot of sense. But there was a period of time he was a main deck staple. And I thought that was just not correct ever.
Well, I think it was much more correct whenever the meta was more interactive than it is right now. When you had 10% affinity lists and 10% goblin lists and all that, he was much better then.
Yeah, when there was like a point in time, especially right after the bannings, when I don't know, probably 45% of the top of the meta was creature based decks. So he was really good then. He did a lot of good work. I guess after we became into Fissure land, he's definitely not as good in those kind of matchups.
Yeah, so where he's not good right now is against Fissure. We've already talked about this, and he's also not that good against blue red or against Delver Fiend, and he's not good against blue red post.
Yeah,
or really any form of post. But everything else is at least passable. But you just can't play a 1/2 for 2 in this meta right now. Not main board.
Yeah, no.
It just doesn't work. So, and the last optional card is Wild Mongrel, which you already talked about that a little bit, David, where the Mongrel just won them the game because you don't turning all your cards into +1/+1 is a really good deal, especially if you're flooding out later on in the game and you've got Quirion Rangers. You can just bounce force back to your hand and discard them to the Wild Mongrel and make it to where your opponent can never really properly block the Mongrel. And that's really where this guy shines. Yeah, he's only a 2/2 for 2, but sometimes he can enable free wins by discarding all 5 cards in your hand to get 7 damage through a turn earlier than you wouldn't have been able to kill your opponent otherwise. So, and he also has some really nifty interactions with against the Delver Fiend deck because he can make himself a different color. So if your opponent Apostle's Blessing his Cyclops or something, then you can change his color from green to white, and then your opponent has to well crap. Protection from green doesn't matter anymore because you can just block it with a Wild Mongrel.
Yeah, I think that's more relevant than people realize, that ability, the color changing aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gives you some backup against Doomblade too.
Circle of Protection's the big one I've been using lately. AzoriusKitty.
Yeah, I saw that you were using that now.
It's not. I mean, it's just like a overreaching card. It's like it works in In Stompy, it works well in auras, and I don't think either of those matchups are particularly like challenging, but having those go in there makes it go from like favorable to super favorable. So I just won't lose those matchups.
Man, why
But
do you hate Stompy so much, David? Jeez.
why do I hate it? I don't really. I like when people play Stompy. I guess it feels like the most like bare real Magic deck there is, and it's like the
Yeah.
antithesis of what everyone. I feel like when they're complaining about Fissure and stuff, like what they would like the format to look like, and I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing or bad thing. It's just kind of what I think eventually might happen if cards keep getting banned. Like a lot of decks like this.
Yeah, and it's got game against everything. So having a deck like this is as the second most prevalent deck in the meta says a lot. This is like this deck is really good, and it can interact with all these decks that are below it and beat them pretty often, like Delver Fiend and Affinity and Blue Red Post. Um, so yeah, I think Stompy's around. It's here to stay for sure. Let's talk about the sideboard a little bit. You got a little bit of flexibility with the sideboard of Stompy. I already said that Stompy's really hard to sideboard with, but you've got a couple of silver bullet type answers. But the problem with Stompy is that you don't really have ways to draw those silver bullet type answers. You just kind of have to hope to get them. So we're going to talk about Scottish Archer now, which I'm running main. A lot of Stompy players are running that main board now.
Yeah,
And that just hoses Delver.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's good. It's a very versatile card, and at worst, it's a 1/2, which is still decent. It doesn't get blown out by electricity and things like that. So the Scattershot Archer, it's a very good card. Well, I don't know why people. I can see running them in the main board. I don't know about 4 in the main, but people really like it, so they run it and they have good results with it.
Yeah, it hoses Delver for sure, and what it also does as a main board card is it makes Fissure players really have to play around it. Basically, is they can't just blindly cast their Clouds of Fairies into Scattershot Archers because, I'm just gonna kill that Cloud of Fairies before you untap your lands.
Yeah,
So you can't snap it back to your hand. And if you get a Scottish Archer and a Quirion Ranger out at the same time, then they can't play Mole Drifters, and you can kill Flip Delvers. And it takes a two card combo to kill a Flip Delver, and that's usually the way that the Delver decks win against you, is by flipping their Delver on turn 2. But if you can cast a Scottish Archer into Quirion Ranger, then that Flip Delver is no longer actually a threat. And so yeah, if you can do that, you can beat down Mole Drifters, you can beat down Delvers, and I think right now Scattered Archer is definitely the correct meta call. Just to beat down the other blue decks that are out there. The next, I like Gleeful Sabotage in the sideboard too.
I've heard a lot of people like not liking it lately.
Yeah, I think the reason for people not liking it is Jay Siri has, voiced his opinion quite vocally about how he thinks that Gleeful Sabotage is not a good card.
Oh, I couldn't remember who said that. But I've seen it a couple times. I think Deluxe has said it too.
Yeah, and I don't think so. I think Gleeful Sabotage is an awesome card. I'm bringing it in against Affinity, obviously, and I'm not using it against Affinity as a kill 2 of your lands card. I'm using it against Affinity as kill 2 of your Mirror Enforcers card.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mirror Enforcer is a very difficult card to handle, especially when they start getting multiple on board. In worst case, if you get it and they only have one on there, you blow up one and you blow up, a land as well. It is like technically it is card advantage because you are getting 2 spells for the cost of 1. If you conspire with it, but I find that it's also good in the Delver matchup to help me get through one of those Spire Golems, because you can just conspire it twice to target the same Golem, and if they really want to keep that Golem around, they have to use 2 counter spells to keep it up.
Yeah, that's the other big matchup that I bring in too against against Delver for pretty much the exact reason you said. Is because Spire Golem is one of the ways that they have to stabilize, and if you can cast 2 Gleeful Sabotages, the Sabotage plus the Conspire, often Delver can't save the Golem anymore. And if they really want to save the Golem, they have to use 2 counter spells, which is card advantage. We got Moment's Peace and Fog Effects. We already talked pretty much about where those are useful, mostly against Cyclops and Hexproof Auras. That's really, really useful. You should not bring in Moment's Peace or Fogs against Stompy, against the mirror. You should not do that. I saw a thread on MTG's Evaluation where this guy was playing Stompy and his opponent brought in like 3 Fogs. It's like, no, don't do that. That's bad.
Yeah, it's definitely bad because more likely than not, he sided out some pump spells, and the pump spells are your best friend in the mirror.
Yeah, and I think the opponent's reasoning was that Fog is a tempo play, right? Their plan was to, on a critical turn, fog their opponent and then swing back for lethal. But that doesn't work in Stompy because your Nettle Sentinel untaps itself when you cast a green spell. And then you have these Quirion Rangers to untap blockers. So using Fog as a tempo play when you're playing the Stompy deck, it just doesn't work. You should not do it. Don't play Fogs. You just wasted a card to do nothing when your opponent can untap his creatures with Quirion Rangers or Nettle Sentinel's triggered ability. So, lesson learned, folks. Don't bring in Fog against the mirror.
I've actually, speaking about Fog and Moment's Peace, I've actually brought them in against players that play very slow. If they've taken, 15, 16, 17 minutes in the first game, I'll bring them in just for the fact that I'm going to make them waste time. It's one of those cards that can really help you time out an opponent if they're a slow player, or, you can just feel that they're stalling against something. Why not stall them for an extra, 4 or 5 turns if you can?
I'd rather just beat their face in.
Well, I mean, that's true too. It's fun to kind of screw with people sometimes. Maybe not in a daily event. I wouldn't do that, but
yeah.
I think there's probably times when that's correct.
There could be times when that's correct, but most of the time, if you're bringing in Moment's Peace against a slow player, then let's say for example, Fissure deck took 20 minutes to beat you in game 1. Are you gonna bring in Moment's Peace then? They only have 5 minutes left on their clock.
Well, I might. That's like the exact situation I was thinking about. Like, I think it's more like you win or you lose game 1, you win game 2, so you're on the draw for game 3. They have 5 minutes left. Like, you're probably not going to outrace them. I might consider bringing in Fogs.
Okay.
Just because, like, specifically Fog, not Moment's Peace, because...
Yeah, if they fissure your board, you're not going to be able to Moment's Peace anymore.
Yeah.
And, like, the thing that I'm noticing is sort of, like, the sort of new Fissure player crutch is sort of like Ulamog's Crusher, even though, like, a lot of other people play him too. But I just feel like whenever I'm trying to time someone out, if they have the Crusher, it's sort of a moot point because that just ends the game quickly. But if you're playing against someone and you, like, see their list or something and you know they don't have Crusher, or they're playing the blue-white list that usually doesn't have Crusher either.
No, it doesn't.
I would be much more inclined to bring the Fogs in because they're gonna have to take like a significant amount of time to try to kill you, even after they go off.
All right. Well, that's realistic, I guess. Makes sense. I think the really good Fissure players, though, are gonna kill you with adequate time left,
Oh, I agree. I mean,
for sure.
but there's a lot of people who play that deck who aren't very good.
Yeah. What else do we want to talk about in the sideboard? You have a variety of like just silver bullet type answers, like Hornet Sting and Plummet and Serene Heart, too. And the sideboard varies a lot. I know my sideboard doesn't run those. Doesn't run Serene Heart. It just runs the sabotages for the hexproof decks. But you can just sort of vary that based on your meta, I think.
I love the Hornet Stings. I think that card is awesome. I'm glad it exists.
Yeah, Hornet Sting is a very good card against Delver. You Hornet Sting a turn 1 Delver, and it's like, oh man.
Yeah, and it was like the one-way Stompy could be Flag Bearers when people actually played those.
Yeah, and the the standard bearers come back every once in a while too. So I do like having the Hornet Stings just in case that I run into a deck that's running standard bearers for whatever reason. Like I know for a while it was Affinity was running standard bearers, and I thought it was just the weirdest thing. Like the weirdest inclusion of any Affinity deck was the standard bearer.
Yeah, and they ran the I don't remember what the white artifact land was, but they ran like 3 of those just so they could play standard bear out of the sideboard.
Yeah, Ancient Dens.
Ancient Dens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most. I know, David, you hate this. I'm looking at like the generic affinity list on geostats.com, and there are 2 Ancient Dens in the generic affinity list, and no white cards.
It just makes me want to vomit.
Darksteel Citadel, folks. Play Darksteel Citadel instead. Do not play Ancient Den. That was the worst thing too. Is like Affinity was already a pretty bad matchup for Stomp. Like it wasn't a great matchup for Stompy, but then when Affinity started sideboarding into standard bearers, it was just like, ugh, I hate you so much right now. This game is just I can't win this game anymore because you have standard bearers. As a Stompy player too, you don't think to bring in Hornet Stings against Affinity.
Yeah, it seems
it really
exactly
works.
what you don't want to do.
Yeah, and it works against you in so many ways. Like, so Affinity players, if you're having trouble beating Stompy, play standard bearers because you're just gonna blow them out on game 2. As a Stompy player, if you can't target your stuff with pump spells, the 4/4s from Affinity are just gonna run over you. So yeah, play standard bearers, Affinity players.
Kind of like circling back. Shinden's Life Roar was a good card against Standard Bearer when it came in.
Yeah, that is another good card against Standard Bearer.
Yeah, maybe that's where you want to be right now instead of the Hornet Stings.
I still like the Hornet Stings for killing turn 1 Delvers.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they are also just useful for, getting rid of a spell stutter trigger.
Yeah.
Because your opponents are probably going to try and spell stutter your turn 2 play, and that's when you Hornet Sting. And unless they have the Cloud of Fairies out, then you get rid of the spell stutter trigger, and you get to still have your dude on the board.
True.
There you go. The other card that I don't like seeing from the sideboard is Lignify. Ugh.
Yeah,
What do you guys think about Lignify?
I don't understand why people are like, why that's being run so much.
I think it's solely for Delver Fiend, isn't it?
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think with no way to get to the Lignifies against Delver Fiend, it's not really reliable because they're often going to have the Delver Fiend deck has ways to get multiple Fiends and Cyclopses with Preordains and Ponders and Brainstorms or whatever else that they're running. That I think having a few Lignifies on the board and just hoping to draw into them is not really going to do much for you. I'd much rather have another fog effect there than Lignifies.
yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it just seems like it's a very limited card. I mean, and giving any other like kind of deck an 0-4 blocker is pretty significant. So I don't like it. I don't really like the choice on it. Some people, I guess, that I've seen talk about it, and the boards have had reasonable success with it, but I don't really agree with it.
I feel like this these types of spells, like the Thermokarst and the Lignify and stuff, the people and actually the oh shoot, what is that called again? The Sabotage. Um, Maybe we should be asking the players of the decks that we're bringing them in against how useful they are. Like, if my opponent Thermokarsts me, like, I'm so happy about that. So maybe the Stompy player should consider not playing them. And maybe that's the same with Lignify. We should probably ask the Delver player if they care. And if they do, then I guess keep it in. But
Yeah, no, as a Delver player, I don't care if you like.
I mean, Delver Fiend, sorry.
It's like Delver Fiend. Yeah, I don't know, because who is like the really good Delver Fiend players?
I don't know. Suryu, Kuryu. But he doesn't even play anymore. He's like me, I think. He doesn't like to do mainstream stuff. He was playing Delver Fiend back before we had Cyclops. Like that was just like what he used to grind. So he's really good,
Yeah.
but he stopped playing it. And I played him the other day, and he was playing like green, red stuff. So I don't think he's on that anymore.
Yeah, it just like Delver Fiend is just such a non-interactive deck, and what I see with the Delver Fiend list is I almost never recognize the same person playing Delver Fiend.
Yeah.
It's all these names that I'm just like I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. Who is that?
I think that's probably a function of how cheap the deck is and how flashy it is. Like,
Yeah.
people like to play it even though it's not very good. It's not like the worst, and for how cheap it is, I think it's great value. But
Yeah. Dude, we lost Will.
oh no,
Come on, let's get it back.
I wonder where he went.
I'm not sure. Skype just told me we lost the call. I think there's got to be something wrong with him. I
Yeah,
think.
probably.
All right. Well, that sucks. I was going to end the episode, but
You still can.
yeah, I was hoping to get him back though, so we could do sign-offs and whatnot. I'm still recording. This awesome is all going to show up in the recording too, because I don't edit.
Nice. Well, forget him. I don't think it's a big deal.
Forget him. All right, I'll do the sign-off for him if he doesn't have back.
Yeah, if you know how to get a hold of him, then I think that's all that matters.
Mostly. All right, so how can we get a hold of you, Dave?
Well, you can get a hold of me on Twitter. I'm at Shapewaffle5. You can find me at twitch.tv/Shapewaffle5. Or you can find me on MTGO, and I'm just Shapewaffle5. PM me.
All right, so Will, you can contact him on mtgostrat.com. What the heck just happened?
Will wants back in. Say goodbye.
He's back in. All right, let's see if I can get him back in now. Add to group call. There we go.
I didn't want to join with video.
Oh no! Oh,
No. That was my fault. I hit the wrong button. I don't know what happened. I guess we had a hiccup in my internet.
I don't know. You're on video now, but that's cool. How can we contact you, Will?
You can, find me through the website. You can email me, will@mtgostrat.com. You can follow me on Twitter, the same address at mtgostrat.com. And on Magic Online, where I mostly play my casual kind of username, Millhouse02.
Millhouse02. And I'm Chris. You can contact me on Twitter at cweaver8518 or on MTGO. My username there is cweaver. I'm always down to play test with you guys or talk with you on Twitter. One other shout I want to do is I want to get Pauper 8-Mans back. So follow me on Twitter. I tweeted to MTG Worth and Magic Online, whose leg do I got to hump to get Pauper 8-Mans? So follow me, retweet that. share it with all your friends, favorite it, do whatever you need to do. I want Pauper 8-mans back because I can't always play in daily events, and I like playing competitive Pauper. So
Yeah, whenever we're doing,
that's me. This was
sorry to cut you off there.
What's up?
I'm wondering what it would actually take to get that back. Maybe it's like we
I
start like a big campaign between us, Justin, and Alex. We can get 3 sites to back it up and kind of push Wizards to get us some 8-mans back.
Are they positive EV?
I think it takes. No, they're about equal EV.
Oh.
Right, you put 48 tickets go in, and Wizards awards 12 packs.
Yeah.
So, it's equal EV for Wizards anyway.
Okay.
You lose a little bit of EV because packs aren't $4 or 4 tickets a piece, but that doesn't matter too much. I want Pauper.
Yeah,
8-mans
I'd
back.
rather have more choice
That's-
than less.
And I think it takes Wizards about 1 line of coding to put them back in. So I want them back. Let's push and get them back, guys. So
They're probably still in the code. They just commented them out.
Yeah, I don't know why they do
Yeah.
that stuff. It's like, here's your option to make additional money, and they're like, nah, we're not going to do that at all. There's
It's
just
too
no
much
need.
to manage.
yeah. And here's what bugs me about it is you have Legacy and Modern 8-mans, and both those formats fire with much less people in their daily events than Pauper
Yeah.
does. So your 8-mans are certainly going to fire if you get 'em, if you give it back to us, Wizards. So please give us Pauper 8-mans back, please, 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 please. And that's about all we got for today. So once again, this is Chris, Will, and David, Competitive Paupercast, episode 5, signing off.
See you later.
Bye.